Good evening.
Good evening.
I hereby call this meeting of the Public Safety Committee to order. Joining us this evening, the directors of our public safety personnel. Joining us is Chief Mayo from the Fire Department. We have Mel Sattler from our Emergency Management Department, and also Chief Barry Roundtree from our Police Department. Members of the committee, we have a few items on the consent agenda. Before we get to the consent agenda, I want to briefly review the general agenda. There are two items. There's information on handicap placards, and I know we do have a speaker signed up to talk about that. Also, item G2 is a security assessment and improvements for City Hall and the Bryce A. Stewart Municipal Building. Items on the consent agenda are unanimously approved unless the council member wishes to have it pulled for discussion. Members of the committee, are there any items that should be pulled on the consent agenda for discussion? If not, we would entertain a motion.
Second.
Motion and properly second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The consent agenda is approved unanimously. Item G1, please.
Item G1, information on handicapped placards.
Giving us this report on handicap placards is our Director of Transportation, Ms. Tonique McCullough, and at the appropriate time, I will have some comments about our speaker who is here to talk to us today. Ms. McCullough, you have the floor.
Good evening, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Staff was asked to provide information on the proper use of handicap placards while parking, and we've provided information on North Carolina State Statute 20-37.6, which should be in your packet as an attachment. But briefly, I'll just state what or summarize what that statute states. The statute states that any vehicle that is driven by or transporting a person who is handicapped and that displays a distinguishing, that is driven by or transporting a person, who's handicapped and that displays a distinguishing license plate, a removable windshield placard or a temporary removable windshield placard may be parked for unlimited periods in parking zones restricted as to the length of time parking is permitted. This provision has no application to those zones or during times in which the stopping, parking, or standing of vehicles are prohibited, and that would be in situations such as fire zones, loading zones, and things of that nature. This privilege is offered to vehicles driven by or transporting a person who is handicapped, and the use of a placard or plate by anyone other than the applicant or someone who's transporting a handicapped person is a violation of law and subject to fines up to $250. I think the actual statute says a minimum of $100 up to $250. And I will entertain any questions.
Well, members of the committee, I think we'd all agree that every time access is taken away from a handicapped person, it definitely puts their health at risk and in jeopardy. We have questions on the floor at this time for Ms. McCullough before we introduce our speaker here. Councilmember Adams, forgive me.
Yes, ma'am.
I have seen when I pass by cars in the handicapped spaces, these placard temporaries on the mirror, they've expired. What is the statute on that? I mean, I know there's a penalty if they catch you with one, it's like you've broken the law. But is there a possibility or that the state has ever looked at people having to return these placards when they didn't sign up to renew them, much like your registration for your car? When you don't register it, your insurance company or somebody eventually knows that you're driving illegal, or our public safety, the police. But I've noticed a large number of the placards, now I kind of make it my business to look at them when I walk by them. They've expired, Mr. Chair. So they're just no regard for what it's really for. And the people come out of the store, just like we know, or wherever, and they're skipping and running and whatever else, you know.
I'm not sure actually what the, I think it says here that, I was trying to read rather quickly, an expired placard and a renewed placard issued within 30 days of the expiration date of the expired placard, which would have been a defense to the charge had it been issued prior to the time of the alleged offense. So it seems that all existing placards, I'm not sure. I think we'd have to get you that information.
Thank you.
I can't determine what the
looking at.
Madam City Attorney.
C2.
Right. And it seems like if they basically get it issued within 30 days of the expiration date, they may not be subject to the offense. Found guilty of it. But we can get you some more information.
Yeah, we need some.
Is there a charge, Mr. Chair, for the placards, for the,
There is a charge. Chief Roundtree, if you, okay, we've got Mr. Kraus who's telling us it's $5. Chief Roundtree, it's $5 charge for a violation.
No, it's the plaque.
Chief Roundtree, come on up, please.
$5? That's all.
I'm gonna come to you, Councilman.
Good evening again.
Good evening.
I think the question was, is there a charge for a new placard? And I'm understanding that a new
That's the $5.
placard would be $5. Now, the cost of a fine is in the area of $250 for the violation.
And I imagine at some point in time, the committee would like to talk to you about how we can better enforce those fines for those who are violating the process. Councilmember Burke, then we come to Councilmember McIntosh. Councilmember Adams, have your questions
Thank you
expired?
very much.
All right, Councilmember Burke.
Most folks who get those, they get them through their doctors. You know, you have to, and then you go down to the motor vehicles, and that's where they're issued, everything. But I wanted to ask a question. At one time, or do we have anyone now, like ambassadors, that will go around looking at people who are in violation of the handicap parking? Ms. Mary Sloan Jones used to do that at one time very well.
Yes, we still have the program. Currently, we have about 16 members in the program. Only 4 have been active over the last couple of years. But I do have some numbers to let you know that they are working and they are enforcing the handicap parking.
All right, Chief, before we get to the numbers, did you have anything else to say about Councilmember Burke's question?
No.
I think Councilmember McIntosh had a question before we get to the numbers.
Mayor Pro Tem Burke asked the question I was going to. So the process is you go to your doctor fills out a form, and then you go to DMV, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, so, and I think what we're sensing here is that that's not where the problem lies. It's with the expired ones that are just floating around that people use or abuse.
Abuse.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
Chief?
What I was going to add that in 2014, there were 173 handicap parking violations issued. 26 of those were issued by the volunteers here in the city. So we have been doing the enforcement on those violations. One of the things to think about is, even though there may be a sign present, you know, the law states that there has to be a sign erect with the amount of the violation on the sign, and it has to be painted on the ground with the wheelchair. So if those 3 things are not present, you know, the officer can't enforce that violation.
Now, wait a minute, say it again. What 3 things?
A business has to have a sign erect.
Regulatory.
On that sign, you have to state the violation. And on the ground, you'll notice that there's like a wheelchair that's painted. So those 3 things have to be present for it to be a legal handicap parking space.
And that criteria is set in play by the General Assembly, is that correct?
Yes. I'm pretty sure that's still in place.
All right. Ms. McCullough, we cut you off before we go to our speaker. Did you have anything else to add on that subject?
No, sir.
All right. Thank you, Chief. And,
I got one more.
Councilmember Adams.
I apologize, Mr. Chair.
It's quite all right.
If I'm a business and I'm going to designate 2 handicap spaces, am I required by law to do the regulatory sign with the fine on it and the logo of the handicap on the pavement? Am I required by law to do that? Or I have an option?
For it to be enforceable, that's like some of the fire lanes around the city are not enforceable. But for it to be enforceable,
Mr. Chairman, I'll take that one.
Mr. Turner's recognized.
There are some requirements under the zoning that you have a certain amount of handicap parking. If you have 2 parking spaces, you have to have 1 handicap space. If you have in excess of 100 spaces, you have to have 2% as handicap spaces under the zoning code. So, yes, there is a requirement if you're building something new that you have to provide handicap parking. And if it's going to be legal handicap parking, to comply with the zoning, it has to be as the chief has described.
Okay.
Councilmember Burke.
Some people do, through zoning, get the handicap parking spaces, but I don't see the signs up what the chief said. Now, in going through our inspections department, if a owner, what Mr. Turner just said, if that is done with those, does the inspection department tell you you have to put that sign up to say what you will be in violation if I park there?
Mr. Turner?
They will check for that sign, or for those signs, whatever are necessary, at the time that they're going to issue the certificate of occupancy. The problem could be that as soon as the certificate is issued, they don't come back and do regular inspections because that building has been constructed properly. Maintenance of the signs are up to the property owner.
All right, members of the committee, any additional questions at this time? All right, thank you, Chief. Here with us today is Mr. Michael Kraus, who is a resident of our community. He has been in contact with the Public Safety Committee, and he's had a lot to say about handicap parking in our city. I know he has worked vehemently to get some handicap parking legislation going through our General Assembly, something he's very passionate about. Mr. Kraus, we thank you for contacting us, and you have the floor.
Thank you for having me. For the last 2 years, I have been working with my representative in the NC House trying to make amendments to the general statutes concerning handicap parking. Out of those 2 years of effort, House Bill 91 was drafted, ratified, and signed into law by the governor on May 14th this year. And that law requires the North Carolina DMV to do a study on ways to cut down on the legal use of handicap placards, which is a big problem. You'd already mentioned people using expired ones. One of the biggest problems are people using somebody else's, grandma's placards in the car. It's okay for me to park in the space. Now, that's illegal too. So this study is looking into the cost, the feasibility of having more personal identification included on the placard, a photograph, the person's name. Other states require this. It'd make law enforcement that much easier. I do know from researching in the past the Citizens Volunteer Committee, the police department doesn't like those individuals interacting with the person that's parked there. They either don't have a placard or they do. Just because they have a placard doesn't mean that they're legally parked there. It could be somebody else besides who the placard's issued to. So I have been in contact with the commissioner of the NCDMV, and I am going to be allowed to give my opinion and ideas into the study, which will go back to the Joint Legislative Committee of Transportation in January, on or before January next year. It's my goal. Part of that law, too, lets the DMV recommend any legislative changes, and that's what I'm looking for also. Greater fines, insurance points, driver's license points. I want to make it very undesirable for people to illegally park in handicap spots. Because for people like me, especially, and I can't say for every handicapped person, but for me, when somebody illegally parks in a space, it's not a parking violation. It's a crime against a handicapped person. And so I'm here today to ask you all for more enforcement of handicap parking space laws. We need it, and I'm not going to stop fighting for it. Any
Mr. Kraus,
questions?
we certainly thank you for your service and for what you've done on the state level. As you know, because you studied this thing extensively, sometimes we are subject to the will of the state.
Sure.
And this is one of those times. But however, there are things that local municipalities can look at in order to improve on how people deal with handicap parking. Do you have any suggestions that you want to submit to this committee for our review so that we might consider them and possibly make some adjustments as we move forward?
Yes, I do. I know in times past, I've gone through driver's license checkpoints. Everybody coming through gets checked. The police department has a golden opportunity to do just that with handicap parking spaces. Not only can they check for the handicap placard, well, your tag's expired, you're driving on a suspended license, well, you got a warrant out for your arrest. You know, it's a perfect opportunity to catch the whole gambit right then and there while enforcing the handicap parking spaces. That's the main thing I can think of right off the bat.
All right, members of the committee, are there any questions for Mr. Cross? Councilmember Light.
Several references have been made to the volunteer checkup.
Ticketing
checking
program.
the spaces, the handicap spaces. And the chief did say that only 4 people had been, active recently. Do we need to beef that up?
I'd say so. Here's a letter from Sergeant M.J. Snow that I received 2 years ago when I applied for the program. I was told that I'd be contacted when the next class was available. Never heard anything back. And because of my health issues being as bad as they are, I just let the idea go. But yeah, I mean, the more enforcement, the better, whether it's through volunteers or, like I say, doing just little sting operations in heavy traffic and handicapped parking areas, your Walmarts, your food lines. I mean, people are in and out of there all the time.
Shopping centers.
Yeah. Yesterday, I was at Food Line. I was there 20 minutes. 3 out of 5 cars were illegally parked in the handicap spots. 2 when I went in and 1 when I came out. 3 out of 5.
And Chief, in a moment, we're going to ask you to give us some information on the volunteer program and how citizens might be able to apply for that program. Sounds like it's a need to try to beef and ramp that up. Councilmember McIntosh, you
I'll
actually
hold my
recognized.
question for that.
Okay. Any other questions of Mr. Krause?
I'm just making a comment.
Councilmember Burke.
You should be commended.
Thank you.
And we need more citizens like you, because this is our responsibility as citizens. And if we're doing something that's not right, I'm sure the chairman in this committee and other elected officials who sit here want it to be right. So I thank you very much.
I thank you all for your efforts and hard work, too. I do have copies of the House Bill 91 and my information I've shared with and received from the NCDMV for the record, if y'all want it submitted into the
Mr.
record.
City Manager, would you get those for us, please? And he'll make sure they get around, Mr. Krause.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate you coming out, and I echo Councilmember Burke's comments. We'll be in
Thank y'all
touch.
for having me.
Thank you. Chief Roundtree, as Mr. Krause takes his seat, if you can come up and give us a little bit of information about our volunteer program and a little bit about it and how citizens might be able to access the program, please.
Yes, sir. Probably what I'm gonna do is ask Sergeant Snow to come forward. He is here today. He's the sergeant of our Community Resources Unit, and that would be the unit that would, the citizens can contact, and also they would be responsible for training the volunteers.
Sergeant Snow, thank you for being here, sir.
How are y'all?
All right.
What was your question, sir?
So the committee and those who might be watching or in attendance are curious to learn a little bit more about the volunteer program and how citizens might be able to access that program.
They can contact me at 773-7835. That's the Community Resources Unit. The problem with running a class is you've got to have enough people interested in participating. So we need to get the word out somehow to where we can get it better advertised for people. But I've got a couple applications with me today. Of course, we do a background check. And basically, that's about all we do. If somebody's willing to volunteer, they've got to come through a class that we'll offer at the police department.
What do citizens do and how do they execute their responsibilities?
Basically, once they participate in the class, the chief will sign off that they met the background check, that they've participated in the class and passed the class, and then we'll issue them parking tickets. And the only thing that they're allowed to write is the handicap violations. They're not allowed to write the other, city ordinance or parking violations.
Councilman Burke?
Now, when you have a class, when's the last time you've updated how classes should be?
It's been several years, ma'am.
See, that's right there. Right now, we've got to make a change. Is that clear, Chief Roundtree? Because if we have someone who's interested, we ought to have, with all this technology, where you can look at it on, maybe through tech, look y'all talk to each other back and forth, and them little fake
Online.
things you have. And it ought to be, I think, Officer Snow, what's your title again? Sergeant Snow, what we need to do, let's go back and see. Because we have lost one person whose health would not allow certain things, and his tolerance when you have certain health problems. But there are some people with health problems will do a better job and be very interested in what they're doing. And I think if we do that, it will help us to eliminate some of the problems.
Yes, ma'am. Part of it started as the mayor's council several years ago. That's how it was called. But there's no written policy. There's nothing. Nobody has anything that pertains to. You know, I think there ought to be some kind of city policy or something pertaining to it.
That's what we do. It sounds like it's time to roll up our sleeves. Chief Roundtree, did you want to add anything to that?
I was just going to add what we can do for the marketing piece of it. We'll work to put information on our website and also work with city marketing to get information out to the citizens about the volunteer program.
And maybe if
Councilman Burke.
we get it started, maybe there's a little video that I could look at, and then when I come to class, I know quite a few things, and maybe the sessions wouldn't be as long.
Chief
Yes, ma'am.
and Sergeant Snow, as an informational item, maybe the next committee meeting, we could formally bring this program to us, and also maybe some recommendations on how we can improve it, and just to kind of see where we are between now and then, because it's a very important issue, and we need to continue to make steps to address that. Councilman Berlight.
Thank you. So the volunteer, Sergeant Snow, would just write down the information and the license number and whatever and turn it into the police? Or would they actually put something on the car?
No, they get a parking ticket book just like we use, and they'll actually write the ticket and leave it on the car.
Oh, okay, okay.
Now, part of the class is that we don't want them confronting anybody in the parking lot.
Right.
Because we don't want any altercation,
Right.
that type of stuff. But
Because I've seen people park in those spaces and leap out of their car and run across the street. And I always want to yell after them, "What, are you mentally handicapped?" Or I'll get myself beat up at any rate. So, okay, so they can actually give the ticket.
yeah, they give the actual citation, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman McIntosh.
Can we get one of those books and tickets to use? Just kidding. It does seem like that's a perfect opportunity for kids who need service hours
Correct.
to participate. I mean, I see them all the time at Soup Kitchen, and they're bright and energetic and looking for hours to do something good for the community. That seems like a really good fit for that. So maybe in this process, we plug them in.
Members of the committee?
Mature students.
Right.
Mature
Right.
interns.
Right.
I'd ask that we get our juices flowing, members of the council, and when this comes back to committee for consideration, we can put all our heads together and our ideas to the table and try to improve this program. Sergeant Snow, we thank you for what you're doing now,
Thank
but
you.
we know things can always improve and get better. That's just the nature of life. Mr. Kraus, we thank you for what you're doing in our community. Chief, as always, as the head of the organization, we appreciate you. We've got to get better, and that's what we do. Members of the committee, is there any additional information that we should discuss or bring forward at this time on this issue? Thank you. Item G2, please.
Item G2, security assessment and improvements for City Hall and Bryce A. Stewart Municipal Building.
Giving the report on this particular item is our Assistant City Manager, Mr. Ben Rao. Mr. Rao, you now have the floor.
Good evening, Chairman Taylor, members of the City Council.
Good evening.
I think in light of the recent events over the last several months regarding gun violence in the country, the police department, working with our property and facilities management department, has conducted security assessments of City Hall and the Bryce A. Stewart Municipal Building. And what I'd like to share with you tonight are the recommendations from those assessments, and then talk a little bit about the steps we're taking to implement some of those recommendations. So talk about the recommendations, talk about an implementation plan that's both immediate and also somewhat long-term, then talk about our next steps, and then share with you some information that we've pulled together from a survey of other large cities in North Carolina and how they have or have not used metal detectors.
Right.
So to start with the City Hall security assessment, Officer William Burge with the Winston-Salem Police Department conducted both the assessment of the City Hall and of the Bryce A. Stewart Municipal Building. I'm not going to read every single one of these bullet points here, but just want to highlight some of them. The first one there being a recommendation to implement 25 more security cameras in the hallways, the common areas, the lobby areas of departmental suites throughout the building. In particular, we're here in the near term looking to actually purchase and install 3 new cameras that would be positioned, 1 each in the basement and first floor hallways outside of the north elevator, and then an additional camera in the courtyard. Also recommended, and we're looking to implement a card reader for the north elevator so that only council members and city employees can access that elevator. That's the north side of the building where you have 2 entrances in the city hall that are not manned, has a security guard presence. The south hall, people can buzz in to the guard station, but these measures I think will help with security on the north end of the building. Also, a recommendation to look at an electronic badge or check-in station for visitors. We're also looking at modifying the lock there on the passage gate in the exterior courtyard fence, looking at some lighting, installing clear non-breakable glass in the exterior door to the council member office suite. Then in general, and you'll see this recommendation with both buildings, maintain the vegetation where plants are no higher than 3 feet and tree limbs are no lower than 6 feet. Really wanting to improve the visibility around both buildings. And then finally, keeping the anteroom off of the council chamber locked at all times, both the door to the hallway and the door into the chamber itself. Just make sure that remains locked unless it's being used for council meetings. In terms of the Bryce A. Stewart building security assessment, again, a recommendation to invest more in security cameras, at least 12 at the employee entrance night drop box, which is on the east side of the building, the drive-through area, and the common areas right outside of the elevators on every floor. Another recommendation is to actually reposition the guard station to provide better sight lines so that the guard could actually see into the revenue department and see the elevators. Right now, when you walk into the Bryce A. Stewart building, the elevators are to the back of the guard station. Also, again, perhaps investing in an electronic badge check-in station for visitors. Also, recommendation to install bollards at the front entrance. We've had a number of accidents where, if by chance the collision had happened a different way, you could have seen a vehicle come closer to the building. So the bollards would be there both to prevent an accidental run into the building, but perhaps even an intentional run in to the building. Looking to change the lock on the door at the First and Main Street door there at the corner. Right now, an employee who has a key access can unlock it, and there's a chance that the door remains unlocked. This recommendation would change that lock to where it had to be like a keypad entry, some kind of a entry system, and to install a peephole so an employee who's leaving that way can see out before they actually exit through the door. Another recommendation is to lock the access panels to the water supply. There's the doors, it's an in-ground access there on the southeast corner of the building. The recommendation is to make sure that remains locked. I think apparently copper is still a popular commodity, and there's copper in that particular area. Again, maintaining the vegetation around the building. Another recommendation is to install a card reader at the entrance to CityLink. CityLink receives a lot of phone calls, sometimes from irate citizens, and I think the recommendation from the security assessment was perhaps having a little more restrictive access into that particular area. And then some other ongoing items here, testing the panic button in the revenue division on a regular basis to make sure it works, and to make sure that the police department is notified if that button were to be pushed. Another recommendation is to look at the door entry codes in the stairwell. Right now, employees can only access various floors from the stairwell by using an access code, and one recommendation is that periodically that code gets changed when we do have turnover in staff. And then finally, just to upgrade the quality of our video equipment, which really will kind of tie in, I think, to what we're recommending with the security cameras. So these are recommendations. I think some of them we're going to look to implement immediately. Others I think we need to look at a little more closely and evaluate. And so in terms of the implementation plan and talking about immediate improvements, you can see there that we've already made a number of improvements that were recommended, including the gate lock, the additional flood lighting, the glass in the exterior door, the vegetation, the anteroom, and we're in the process of installing the 3 security cameras and the card reader at about a $19,000 cost. So hopefully that will be completed by the end of the month. In terms of the Bryce A. Stewart Municipal Building, I think a number that you can see the items there, that I think we feel like we could go ahead and move forward with those various improvements to improve visibility, to improve both within and both inside and outside the building, and also to perhaps discourage unauthorized access to the building. In terms of long-term improvements, both assessments had recommended investment in security cameras, probably totals between 30 and 40 security cameras, and what we're proposing there is to develop a project, to basically scope out a project, because installing the cameras, particularly in this building, may require some new type of infrastructure, but to develop a project scope and then present it through our regular capital planning process, our 6-year capital planning process, and then through that process identify funding for those investments as part of our 2016-2017 budget, so as part of next year's operating budget. In terms of our next steps after today, as I mentioned, we'd complete the installation of the cameras and the north elevator card reader in City Hall, implement those immediate improvements that I had listed in the previous slide, and then look at the feasibility of repositioning the guard station. This is really a fixed structure, and we're just not sure exactly what it would mean in terms of having to move utilities and also the cost of repositioning that station. Also want to evaluate the feasibility of implementing the electronic badge check-in station. And when we talked about this, I was thinking in terms of what we see at our school system, where somebody would walk in and they would sign in on a computer, click in why they're there, a picture would be taken, and a temporary badge would be issued, so that there's a record of who's there and why they were there and how long they were there. But we recognize that with the activity that we have in both buildings with public meetings and that type of thing, that we have to be mindful of what that impact would be on the convenience of citizens. So we're going to look more closely at that and just see what kinds of possibilities there may be for that. And then finally, to develop a scope for investing in more security cameras in both buildings. Finally, I wanted to share with you the results that our police department found in surveying the other large cities in North Carolina and their use of metal detectors. They contacted Charlotte, Durham, Greensboro, High Point, and Raleigh. And what they found was only Charlotte utilizes metal detectors in their main municipal building. They have 3 metal detectors in their building, invested about $18,000 in those metal detectors, and they staff it with 4 security officers. Raleigh does utilize metal detectors in their police facilities, their police headquarters, and their substations. But the other cities in our survey do not use metal detectors at this time. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Rao. I think I can say to everybody at this table, I hear Councilmember Burke and several other members of this roundtable say that City Hall belongs to the people. And in no way are we attempting to keep the people out from the people's house. But as time goes on, I think it's important that we do consider how we keep our staff, our citizens, and everyone who utilizes City Hall safe. And that's what we're discussing here today. So I've seen a lot of hands to go up. So I'll start with our Mayor Pro Temp, and I'll work our way back around this way to the members of the committee and so on and so forth. Mayor Pro Temp Burke is recognized.
Thank you. I'm going to be brief. Thank you for the report. What makes us unique in this city? When you've heard about crime and certain things happen around the country, we've always been a step ahead. So if it takes certain things for that to happen, then I think what we need to do it, Mr. City Manager, because people use us as an example.
Councilmember Light?
Thank you. Ben, when you're talking about security cameras, are you talking about like the security guard having an array that he can see all the different halls and levels of City Hall?
Yes.
It's not just a tape?
No, ma'am. It'd be active monitoring.
Thank you.
Councilmember Montgomery.
I think that one thing about City Hall here is the fact that it's very accessible for citizens. And coming in and coming out, I think there's a great plus to that, but then also we have to look at the same time, everything that's happening around in the community, making sure that staff, citizens, and all are safe within the same facility that they're still having free access to. And so anything that we do, I think it needs to be done in a way where people still feel as though they have access, but understanding with the world that we live in, that there are certain necessary steps that need to be taken to make sure that people feel safe in the facility. And so a couple of things. One, I with the visitor kind of system, I think that's a very simple system. And I think it's one that is very able to track in terms of people coming in and out. And it's very, once you know what you're doing, in the sense that there's very simple in terms of self-use. You have a person there sitting there and they click it and picture's taken, it prints out, and you slap your sticker on your chest there. And I think that would be something, if that was something we decided to do, it would just have to be a cultural change for city government in terms of meetings. You know, please allow, you know, extra time for, at almost everywhere else you go, that same message you get, please allow a few extra minutes to check in. And if that's what it takes to make sure that people are safe, something like that, I think may be necessary. And there's always too much until until you need it.
Right.
And so I think that's the thing, you know, we want to make sure that we have enough, but it's not too much. Another thing is, I've been to a Greensboro City Council meeting, and I got wanded before I came in. So I'm not sure where if that was the question that was asked, but I know they use, you had to get wanded before I went into the chamber. So. I don't know, the person behind me too, so I don't. So
They may have looked at fixed structures as opposed to wanding, but we can clarify that.
Okay. Councilmember Adams.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As most of you know, I mentioned this years ago when as they say, the world as we know it began to change here in America, when there was a council meeting and the person came in angry and they did fatally take lives and injure people. And the world we live in, technology, we were able all to see it across the whole country as to how that happened. And with what we're seeing right now in the world of people being able to walk into areas where people have always thought to be safe, whether it's a school or whether it's a religious setting, it just tells me, as Councilmember Burke has said, we need to step up our A game. We are not trying to keep people from coming to City Hall. But the one thing I have to hand it to Johnson Controls, they did a survey of the employees and asked them 2 or 3 questions. How safe do you feel at your job? And the results came back that over 70–80% of the employees didn't feel safe, and it had where you could pick why, 2 or 3 things. And a lot of them, including me, felt like people could just walk in, I'm mad at somebody, and I'm taking everybody. And so I felt that same way once I became elected, that we needed to change the way we do business and protect our staff and our employees while they're working to do the good work for the citizens of Winston-Salem, and not have to worry about somebody that got mad at a council member or at a public officer or a staff person that didn't answer them right on the phone. Back in the day, I'm going down there. I'm going to tell that we can't allow that anymore. So what I talked with the city manager was whatever we can do to protect our employees, protect the public when they're here to do business with us at council meetings, and protect us, count me in. I know it's extreme, as both council members have said, it's a culture shift, a paradigm shift, but I don't think anybody would be reluctant to follow it, because when we thought we had to take shoes off every time we caught a plane and take jackets off and belts off, at first a little inconvenience, but now everybody knows, they leave early, you know the expectation and why we have to do this. So Mr. City Manager and Chair, I am about the safety of our employees, the citizens of Winston-Salem, and this board and this government.
Councilmember? Councilmember Bessie.
Yeah, I think I'm a dissenting voice here. If there was such a thing as achievable perfect safety, I would be hesitant to oppose it. But the reality is that all we can do is manage risks. And I think it's just as important not to overreact as it is to underreact. I think additional security cameras, perfectly reasonable. Some steps to further ensure that doors that are designed to be locked stay locked, very good. I am hesitant to support anything at our evening meetings or our public meetings that is going to substantially delay and discourage citizens from participation. The truth is that if somebody is out to commit a criminal act, they're going to find a way to do it just outside the building, sitting in a car in a parking lot, sitting on the street. They don't have to come into the meeting. And yet we can, in effect, I think, significantly discourage participation at our meetings if we go overboard. I think the analysis or the analogy of airline rules is a good one, but for a different reason. I think it has made flying some of the rules that I think are marginal in impact, but significant in inconvenience, make flying a substantially less welcoming experience and discourage a lot of people from using it. I frankly don't want to fly when I absolutely have to, because it's no longer a pleasant experience. I think I would caution and counsel moderation and being careful not to overreact, while we also don't ignore potential issues.
Is there anybody else at the round table that wishes to be heard at this time? Councilmember McIntosh.
I'd probably lean a little bit more towards Dan, although I think one thing I do recognize when I look around at city employees, I think we have an awful lot of females that work for the city. I think that's very commendable. We have a lot of females on city council, and I think the perception problem is a little different. The perceived safety is a little different. But I do agree that I don't think we need to be Fort Apache to Bronx and go overboard and make this a less welcoming place to be. I think we need to spend time looking at, I think there's some very good options in here. I'd be hesitant to carry them all out, and I'd be hesitant to set up metal detectors. But I do think we do need to up our game in terms of security for both council people and also staff.
All right. Any additional comments?
Just one.
Councilmember Montgomery.
In the, like the report that we've come out with, and we put these out here, I'm not one to think, people, just sitting out there waiting to do something bad, but I think maybe right or wrong, most people are good. But we do have a report that illustrates where there are security issues, and we have this as public document. And so my challenge in that is that as we have published that as areas of risk, I find it that we must do something, because we have essentially said to the community, these are areas that are vulnerable or provide some risk. And so I would make sure that we keep that in mind, because this is a full presentation of some sort. I don't know what that is, but that's been something that we've kind of shown in this. So that's the only thing I would add to that statement, that we have put that out there.
Mayor Pro Tem Burt, then we'll go to Councilmember Bessie.
I was going to ask the city manager, when we have the job from 8 to 5, about how many of the employees stay? Because sometimes when I'm coming to a meeting and I get on the elevator and come to the second floor, in that office there are a few people still working. And you also have the bathroom, which is to your left when you come in, and anyone could be hiding. And when I go into these bathrooms, I don't care what anybody says, I say, I'm in here, who's over there?
You want to know.
Because you have people can slip in here, and also when you leave that door where we go in, unlocked sometimes. And then you have the employees who come down from downstairs, they go through another area, but you don't know who can slip in that door when you open that door. So I think we cannot be, it's not being overacting. We don't want to get the citizens all nervous, but we just have to be real and look at things and see what we can do to make it safe for everybody.
Councilmember Bessie.
Yeah, I think the point about fixing the specific identified weaknesses is a very good one. I think that the outside entrance weaknesses repairs should be prioritized.
Any other suggestions for priority?
Yeah, the places where you're not sure that something's going to lock again after you, that kind of thing, where you're not sure that that a door can't be left unsecured, that kind of. I think the key is to achievable heightened safety is to know when people are there. And to know that they can't get in without being seen. There's only so much you can do about the people that you know are there. But you want to know that you know when they are there.
Members of the council, we'll get ready to close this item out. Councilmember Light.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Oh, one item on your assessment of City Hall that leaves me with a question. The north elevator, City Hall. Why, I mean, there are people perhaps who come to a meeting that are not employees or council members or whatever. So that's, I don't understand why we would need to secure the elevator there.
Well, I think the feeling was that because, folks, there is access to the building on the north end and on the first floor and the basement floor, and although that requires card entry, it just being on that end of the building where the council member suites are located, that having that additional measure in place for access to that particular elevator.
I'm thinking
Yeah.
of the wrong
Yeah,
elevator.
the one that comes from the basement
Okay, I
up.
see.
The
Okay.
one out here would be the public elevator,
Right.
where the guard can see them when they go up. And
Okay, all right, that's, I don't even think about that. Okay, good, thank you.
For those who aren't familiar, the north elevator actually leads to the offices of some of our staff.
Right.
And it's a very intimate space where we'd like to try to have as much security as possible there. Any other,
Yes.
Councilmember Adams.
Again, I would suggest that it would be good to get the input from our employees to ask a simple 1, 2, 3 survey.
Okay, I know what those-
And ask them how safe do they feel at their job here in their workspace, and give them some options. If you say, do you feel safe at your job, and they say no, you need to at least have 1 or 2 or 3 options that you have for them to pick as to why. Is it security? Is it other things? Give them 1 or 2 or 3 things to pick. And it's an anonymous survey, and I think that data would be instrumental with us too, because we don't work here every day, all day. Our employees do. So we need to know how they feel about it.
Mr. Manager, Mr. Rao, you've heard our comments. I think we have a tough job to balance the need for safety versus the need to accommodate our citizens who come into this building adequately, as it's been mentioned. So if you'll just take this information back, you can bring back to us anything that you may need to, but I think you've heard more or less the tone of the committee. Members of the council, we are finished with this item. That concludes our business this evening. Is there anything else that should come before us for the good of the order? There's nothing further, then we will hereby consider this meeting to be adjourned.